You're not going to like to hear this, but statistically, your business is more likely to fail than it is to succeed. Now, before you come at me all up in arms, let me actually show you the data and the numbers behind that. So come with me, watch my screen. So this was pulled just a couple of minutes ago. What we have here is approximately 20% of new businesses will fail within the first 2 years of their start date, first 2 years of business. And that's going to raise 50% by the 5-year mark and 65% likelihood within the first 10 years of business. There is a strong possibility, unfortunately, your business will fail. Now let's look into what some of these reasons are. 82% of businesses will fail due to cash flow mismanagement or shortages. Simply put, they don't know how to use their money and they're not getting enough money coming through the door. 42% of businesses will fail because they've created a service or a product that essentially there's no longer a need for it. That happens more often than not as the primary reason. 19% of startups will fail due to simply being outcompeted. And that right there, ladies and gentlemen, is a lot of what we're going to talk about, tying into 29% of startups will fail due to running out of cash. It is incredibly difficult to run and operate a business if you have not enough money, or especially no money to do so. A brief introduction, who I am and why am I talking to you about all this right now. My name is Colin Papino. I've been in the business space for many, many years. I've been in business for almost 9 years now. My primary service that I do now is I help business owners, just like yourself, over 4,000 business owners, as a matter of fact, raise working capital for the purpose of reinvesting it into their business for the sake of scale and growth. I myself have raised hundreds of thousands of dollars for my own businesses. This right here is about $500,000 just sitting in my hand of pieces of metal and plastic. Our specialty are 0% business credit cards and also business lines of credit. Some statistics here you've seen on my screen so far. I want to talk about it a little bit. This is the last 6 months of business, 6 months of live data from October of last year to March as of currently right now. As we see right here, this was updated 1:25 p.m. Today is Saturday the 8th. Matter of fact, I'm even going to refresh my screen so you know this is a live website. Okay, this right here will pull from a bunch of different data sources that we have for our own clientele. Since then, we have done 814 applications running at a 98% success rate for our clientele, which has netted $51.1 million, million with an M, $1 million in funding for our clients, with an average of $81,000 per funding round. When we work with a client, we at a minimum will do 3 funding rounds with them and for them, some of them going upwards to 5 and beyond. The average client that we work with raises just about $240,000 as an average. Right here, if I scroll down just a little bit, there's actually a lot more data on here, and I will happily give you the chance to look at this. We update it every other day. So right here, one round that we did for a client, $55,000 through Chase, $42,000 through American Express, with a net of $97,000 on an average of $48,500 for applications. This one came out to $114,700. This one, $96,500. This one came out to $151,000. As we see here, we show our wins and our losses. A lot of people think when it comes to funding that, denials are the end of the world. As a matter of fact, they are a valuable resource because we get information from the banks and lenders that otherwise we couldn't find out ourselves. We get an inside glimpse of what their systems are looking for. So if we see right here, debt to income ratio, that tells us in this particular case in this state, which is in Florida, Wells Fargo was looking at DTI on this particular client. Right here, we have TD Bank was a denial, low personal score, but even with a low score, we were still able to raise $58,500 within, again, one funding round for this client. Right here, 165,000. This all the way, 7, 8, 9, and 10. Okay. 90% approval ratios. Right here, now, approval ratios has a lot into that. It is not all just sunshine and rainbows where every application we submit with a client is going to get approved. About, what is that number? About 656. Their final result was approved, with being only 480 being instantly approved. That leaves us 210 that were instant decisions. And then, even with that, 73 of them ended up actually being denied even after they were pending, with another 39% of them, no matter what we could do, we could not get over that hump of that denial. But that's okay, because our major lenders that we work with is Chase, American Express, Citi, Barclays, and so on. But, talking about what we've done is not the reason why I wanted to sit here with you for a few minutes, but rather, funding is nothing but a vehicle for your business. We've always been under that assumption, always with that mindset of why we do what we do with our clients. If you were to have a lot of funding, if you had a lot of funding, access to a lot of money, but not a sound plan, not a way how to use it, in some cases, not a solid business, oftentimes we would actually not even work with a client in that situation. We would help them out. We'd give them some tools and some resources so they can figure out what is it that they're trying to do. But every client we've worked with, all over 4,000 of them, they were able to take this capital, reinvest it back into their business, because frankly, you, me, or nobody else, I'm not going to get wealthy if I was able to liquidate every single one of these. Sure, would it allow me to have maybe a year of pretty well solid just living? Totally. But beyond that, this money will eventually run dry. But if I were to take this 500,000, liquidate it into hard cash, reinvest that, and got a 5x on my money, and then began to compound that revenue in some type of a business venture or investment, well, now we're moving the needle. That, ladies and gentlemen, is why we do what we do. Everything is for the purpose of scale and growth of a business or an investment. So, why I wanted to also make this video is lately I've been having a couple conversations with potential prospects. And a lot of them have been saying, hey, Colin, I'm looking for funding, but I don't want a whole bunch. I just want enough to pay for a little bit of marketing. I just want enough to buy this one piece of equipment, whatever be that is. Well, this is a situation where if you were to only ask for 20,000, or if you only had 20,000 to put back in your business, how far could you actually stretch that, and what could you accomplish with it? Sorry to burst the bubble and kind of let the cat out of the bag right away, but I'm going to tell you, it's not a whole lot. So again, this is a brief recap, and this is after we've raised $51 million for our clients. And that's just over the last 6 months. That's through 627 applications. Funding rounds. There's not an application, but funding rounds. So example 1, okay? So we have 20K in funding. Good chance, it'll be able to cover some basic expenses if you have those. It could probably cover some bills, particularly if you have a building, whether that's rent, utility, if you're in transportation business, trucking, whatever have be it. Maybe that's fuel, some tires, things like that nature. This is really, really, really important when it comes to inventory. If you do e-commerce, if you own a business that you resell goods, anything like that, inventory is your lifeline. If you don't have enough inventory in stock to then resell or to sell to new customers, you're hurting for money because you don't have anything to sell. It's hard to make money when you don't have anything to sell. Minor repairs, short-term relief. And trust me, I lived that where I have a little bit of cash set aside. You feel good going to bed, but you still have that voice in the back of your mind of, oh goodness, one bad month, sometimes one bad week, that little nest egg could get evaporated really, really, really quickly. So then we have option 2, right? And this is what our clients end up doing, is they go use this capital for the purpose of scale. It's hard to write on this, so don't mind my squiggly little lines here. I know they're pretty ugly, but I get the point across nonetheless. What can you do if you have an adequate amount of funding? Well, number one, you can hire, right? First, depending on what kind of business that you're in, hiring could be the game changer, particularly if you're in like service-based business where you can then bring on an additional crew. You can bring on a crew manager. You can go ahead and you can upgrade your systems. You can get new inventory. You could even then break into new markets in some cases. Okay. Nonetheless, it allows you to grow. That's what this is all for. It allows you to compound your funding, your OPM, other people's money, compound that into scale for the business of which you're trying to operate, right? If you don't have that, again, it just puts you right back into a survival mode. And it's not just a mentality, it's a survival mode reality. Okay, if you have little funding to work with, you might get a little bit of runway, but at the end of the day, you're going to get right back to the same spot that you're already at. Okay. And then just on the flip side is with adequate funding, again, the potential that you can put into this. And let's just use myself as an example. I started my first business 8 years ago. And my first business was actually credit repair. And when I started that off, I used all of my own cash. I bootstrapped the entirety of that business. I liquidated my 401k, my savings, everything I had, every liquidity I could get my hands on, I put into that very first business. And what that did is it propelled me very quickly in that first business, of which I still own, but it put me in a position that I was incredibly cash poor. And I started looking at where could I find where can I look for money for a business? And I had a lot of history in the banking world beforehand, but I had no idea what I was doing when it came down to trying to fund a business. So I just went to probably the first place that we all go to is I put in Google, I typed in business loans. And what that populated for me was a whole bunch of links, particularly for MCA loans, MCAs, which, if you're not familiar with what an MCA is, it's basically predatory loan. They go off revenue, they don't use credit, they don't care about time of business. In short, I was approved for $90,000 through two loans. I ended up turning both of them down because if there was even the slightest mistake, the slightest issue, whatever what that was, very strong possibility I just would have gone bankrupt. Went out of business, gone back to my old job, and basically hung my hat back up and says, hey, I tried this, it didn't work out. I just lost money kind of ordeal. Went back to Google, and I started looking up alternative methods for business loans. And what came up was, basically what came up was the idea of these guys, once again, business credit cards. And did a little bit of research for about 3 days, applied on a Saturday afternoon. I got over $100,000 in total approvals in one day. What that allowed me to do, again, I said, use myself as an example. I was able to hire, I was able to throw a ton of money into marketing. I was able to button up and tighten up and add new systems. I was able to hire people on the fulfillment side. And eventually that allowed that business to continue to grow and to scale, and then opened myself up because of hires, because of systems, because it turned into a well-oiled working machine. I could then take a step back and I opened another credit repair business. Eventually I opened a marketing agency. Reason for the marketing is what we were doing worked. A lot of other people in the space were asking for help. I said, hey, sure. Here's a fee. Let us jump in and replicate some of this stuff for you. It allowed me to work with a good partner of mine. We started getting into trucking, which we still own. It allowed me to start other businesses as a partner. It allowed me to not invest money, but reinvest the resources and knowledge to become partners. I was able to start BCA, and I started BCA because I recognized and I learned something for my first exposure looking for money is there's potential here. I started doing it for free, kind of free, for some of the clients through credit repair. They were having success. Then the light bulb went off, says, hey, this is something that actually has a real use case for people. Okay. And it all started because I started looking for money. What I've been able to accomplish using OPM has been huge, and it has served me over and over and over. But I always had a plan. I always had a way how to execute. The funding itself, albeit, is very difficult, particularly now. Banks have cracked down tremendously. They've made everything more difficult. Rules, regulations, the political spectrum, the world spectrum, all this plays a role that banks, they want to give money out. They have to give money out because that's how they operate. Now that's how they pay their bills. But they have to do it the safest way possible. So when people are trying to approach a lender and their credit is off, here actually let's just even skip this slide, right? Let's just jump into this because this is a good topic to bring up. If their credit is bad, or actually, let me just tell you what are the indicators that banks look for. Number one is always going to be credit. That is numero uno, top priority, because it builds a picture. Even though it's money for the business, it's business funding, they're still going to look at the owner's credit. Because if the owner does not have a good history of managing debt, managing money, it's a bad bet on their end. So they're not going to take it. So credit is a big factor. And it's not just what the score is. That's a huge misconception. I've gotten people done with more funding on a 680 credit score than some people with an 800 credit score, right? It's about the contents. What is on the report? If you have very little accounts, even though with a fantastic score, you're not going to get as much funding. If you have negative accounts with a great score, you're not going to get sometimes any funding. Now, I showed you earlier a case example where score wasn't great, but we were still able to get other funding done. That's because we have lending relationships. We have people called relationship managers that can represent the client on those applications. Those are folks that work at the banks, okay? So we have tools, we have ways how to get around stuff, but it's still always going back to this credit itself. Next is going to be the business, right? If the business is poorly structured, meaning paperwork is a mess, you have different stuff, your address goes to clearly a virtual address that's, a 500 square foot building with 300 businesses working out of it. Banks aren't dumb, right? We use AI a lot in my industry. Don't you think banks are going to do the same when they have billion-dollar budgets? Come on, let's be honest with ourselves. Even small banks, they're going to protect their money the best that they can. So you got to make sure the business is well dialed in. You also got to make sure that, again, you have, well, actually, no, not again, I haven't mentioned it, but you got to make sure your business email address is good. You got to have a website, you got to have a phone number. You have to separate you as the owner from the business itself. If there's a clear, connection, even though you are the owner, but if you're the one representing the business, that is a huge red flag to banks. It means you're not serious. It means, hey, this is a side gig I'm trying. Hey, if it crumbles to the ground, whatever, no skin off my back, right? That's not enough buy-in by the banks, to the banks, sorry. It's not enough buy-in to the banks that you're going to be serious. If something happens, you're going to own up to the money that is owed, a variety of things, okay? You got to separate yourself. This is you, and this here is the business, right? One cannot be the same. They have to be separated and different. Next is going to be business credit. Business credit is based off your EIN number, which is essentially your social security to relatable. So your EIN is relatable to your social. It's a tracking thing, allows banks, institutions, the government to identify the business. But geez, if I can spell here. Oh my goodness, not that. So business credit. Boom. Business credit is vital because it's another way to separate you from the entity. We've gotten a lot of funding done for people that personal credit can be so-so, but we've spent 4 months, or they've done it in the past, just building and building and building and have a beautiful business credit profile. That at times is just enough, especially when we're looking at, like, say, lines of credit and things of that nature. So we have credit, we have business structure, we have business credit, and there's a variety of other things like time in business, revenue, sorta. That's a cool thing when it comes down to some of the lines of credit and business credit cards. They don't ask for doc, so no doc, which is for a good amount of businesses. Say they haven't done their taxes yet. Revenue might be on the up, but it's not super, super strong yet. You know, you're not making $100,000 a month. You're something like that. No doc means we don't have tax returns. We don't have bank statements, things like that. So that's kind of like what do banks look for? And this is how you can fund growth, not gaps. Funding is not an end all be all, right? It's not it's not like a magic genie lamp that fixes all of your problems. Funding is a fantastic power and position to be in to set yourself up to have the strongest business possible in the shortest period of time. If you were to set a goal and you said, hey, I'm going to save $100,000 to put back into a business, a venture, whatever, right? How long is that going to take? For the average individual, this is a mountain of a task. Or we can get your business set up, we can get you set up, we can have you at $100,000 in possibly 2 weeks, right? That decision is yours and yours only to make. So if you would like to have a conversation with my team, or you would like to have a wealth of resources and information that will help you start doing this stuff on your own, go ahead, click the link down in the description of this video, and I'll see you on the next one.